Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Access Granted. I'm here joined by a familiar face. If you guys haven't seen him on YouTube or TV, you've definitely heard him on the radio. I got Matt Moscona of 104.5 ESPN in Baton Rouge, and also Louisiana. He's also the owner of LouisianaSports.net. Matt, thanks for hopping on. How's your day been going?
What up, Grant? Good, man. You know how it is though. Just that time of year, and football season's awesome, but it's really busy doing radio and a lot of other things. Program director over at 104.5 ESPN. So with the storm coming, we're trying to plan all these contingencies. With what happens if people can get to work, not to work. So busy day, man. And then launching a website on top of that. So why not?
Yeah.
But it's been good, man. Just busy.
Yeah, and it's always busy when it's football season, but it's even busier down here in Louisiana, especially during hurricane season. And Brian Kelly talked about, the hurricane preparation going to the South Carolina game. The last time this happened was against UCLA a few years ago, and that ended up being a disastrous game for LSU as they lost by double digits. Is there any fears of that going to this game against South Carolina?
It's a good question. I don't think so. I think 21 was just, I think that had less to do with Ida and more to do with the coordinator situation. Remember, so you had the disaster of Bo Pelini in 2020, and then Steve Ensminger retired. So that was the first game for Jake Peets and Durante Jones. Peets was calling his first game ever, and Durante Jones hadn't been a defensive coordinator since 09, and that was at the Division II level. I think LSU is much more equipped going into this game and to handle this situation with a head coach that's actually stable and two really good coordinators as well. Blake Baker we all know the DC at Missouri the last 2 years. Well, the last 2 years against South Carolina, Missouri allowed 10 and 12 points in those two games. And Shane Beamer said it when he met with reporters on Tuesday. Like he called Blake Baker by name and said, this defensive coordinator has given us fits the last 2 years. So I think LSU, it's a good question, but I think LSU is just in a much better situation now than they were in 21 for a lot of different reasons.
Yeah, and that was with a guy like Spencer Rattler, quarterback, which makes it even more impressive. But
Yeah.
South Carolina has a new quarterback in Lenore Sellers. I know Brian Kelly mentioned him a lot in his press conference. Is there any fear of a Lenore Sellers breakout game against LSU? I know he struggled against Kentucky, but it's a fair question. That, with college game day coming in,
Listen, on 3 rated Sellers is a top 10 quarterback. And he may in time be good. He's 640 pounds, or 640. He's 240 pounds and can throw the ball a ton. So I think there's a physical skill set there that's going to allow him to become a really good player. Mm-hmm. Right now, he is not a really good player.
Right.
Grant, I don't know if you watched that game against Kentucky on Saturday. I did. I had South Carolina +9, so I was interested, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And that game was 10-6 at the half, and Carolina had 105 yards of offense. Oh. That was more about Kentucky's inability to do anything through the air. And oh, by the way, the last touchdown was a pick 6. It wasn't even an offensive score for South Carolina. Right. So, no, man, I watched them against Old Dominion, and Sellers was atrocious. I watched them this week against Kentucky. They are void of skill guys. Sellers is not good enough to carry an offense right now. I get LSU has its issues defensively, but my goodness, man, I would be stunned if an LSU defense, which held a Lincoln Riley offense and a fourth-year quarterback in Miller Moss and legit receiving talent, held them to 20 points until the final 8 seconds of that game. If South Carolina and Lenora Sellers lights up LSU, I'll be at a loss for words, man. I'll be at a loss.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, you think about it. I mean, you said 20 points. There's really 13 points for 3.5 quarters. I mean, that was a really impressive performance by the defense, given how young it is in the defensive backfield. I know they gave up a lot of yards, which is given in Lincoln Riley offense, but that was a pretty impressive performance by that defensive backfield. But speaking about South Carolina, the defense gave Kentucky fits. I know Kentucky's offense is I mean, they ran the ball, I believe, 17 straight times in that game. But, South Carolina's defense, it was aggressive. I think they lead the SEC in sacks. I know they lead the nation in turnovers. So what does their defense what does their defense do that makes them so great against these? I know there was a great offense, but
yeah, I know
they
what you're
could give
saying.
LSU a lot of problems. Yeah,
They're a talented front seven. That is, especially on the defensive line, that is South Carolina's best position group. Got to talk to a couple of those guys actually at SEC Media Days in Dallas this year. They're big and physical. Tonka Hemingway is a really good player as a veteran SEC guy. They got the freshman defensive end who had a really good game against Kentucky this past weekend. That's to me, like, that is the matchup. Listen, you've got the LSU offensive line with 2 first-round tackles that have not given up a sack in 2 games, going against a pretty active and talented South Carolina defensive front. If LSU's offensive line, I know all the comments about the running offense, that's not what I'm talking about. If LSU's offensive line can keep Garrett Nussmeier upright, South Carolina does not have the athletes to cover LSU's skill guys. And I think Garrett Nussmeier will throw for 300 yards and LSU will light up South Carolina and score and win this game. But it's really that matchup. And they're going to be tested. I think this will be the biggest test so far, including USC. This will be the biggest test so far for LSU's offensive line against that pass rush from South Carolina. That's going to be the matchup to watch.
Mm-hmm. And what do you think are the issues with the offensive line? Because, we were hyping this offensive line up to be this elite offensive line. They are elite in pass blocking, but run blocking, it seems not to be there. I know that, USC was packing the line, and so was Nichols. But what's been going on with the offensive line? I mean, there's a lot of questions around this offensive line.
Yeah, I think you just said it. I mean, I know that's not an answer that fans want to hear. You wanted to be able to go pound the ball against Nichols, and I get it, man. But Brian Kelly said it on Monday. I mean, we were sitting there at the press conference, and his point was, I'm paraphrasing, but we're not going to run the ball just to prove. He told Joe Sloan, we're not going to run the ball just to prove we're big, tough guys that can run the ball. Like if they have an 8-man box, check out of the run and throw it. On Saturday against Nichols, LSU threw it 38 times. They ran it 21. Brian Kelly said they had 35 or 36 run plays called, but Nussmeier checked out of them because of the look they got at the line. The point that I made to LSU fans this week, Grant, is, man, I covered this team for a decade, and we all watched them, where you had a coach that very stubbornly ran into 8- and 9-man boxes over and over and over again when you had NFL wide receivers all over the field, and you kept running too tight fullback because you were going to prove you were bigger and tougher and could run against 8- and 9-man fronts. And we all collectively lost our minds for a decade because LSU refused to get creative and throw the football. Now you got an offense where you got a great quarterback who's been hanging around for 4 years. You got a bunch of NFL freak show receivers running all over the place. You got 3 tight ends that are all pterodactyls. You got a defensive back who was a quarterback in high school who moves to running back this week. They don't even give him a carry. They throw him the ball 3 times. He catches all of them, scores a touchdown. And we're going, why can't they run the ball? Like, shut up. Like, I don't want to watch LSU run against a 9-man box. I watched that crap for a decade. No, like, you have good receivers, throw the ball. If they're going to give you if they're going to let you throw it and you're going to have man coverage on Kyron Lacey, throw the ball. Yeah. So I don't know, man. Look, if they get into a situation where a team flips and says, all right, look, we're not going to just let you pick us apart in the secondary. We're going to go play coverage. You're going to play, 2 high safety. You're going to be in dime with 6 defensive backs. And so you're looking at a 5-man box. Okay, let's see them run. And at that point, Grant, if they can't run, then we can criticize. Then we could say this offensive line ain't what we thought it was going to be.
Yeah.
But, dude, there was this video circulating I saw after the USC game that all these LSU fans were looking at. And LSU kind of got pinballed at the line of scrimmage trying to run the ball in this play. And they're like, they got – I'm like, freeze frame it. There's 9 red jerseys and 7 white jerseys, including the running back. Like, you don't have enough guys. Don't run the ball against that front. So, anyway, man, long answer. I'm not as upset about the lack of a running game as a lot of people are. I think the 3rd and 1 with John Emery against USC, I think that was a good play call, man. And I think Emery was running hard at that point. Kamorian Pimpton had a 14-yard reception on the previous play. You left him in there so as not to be predictable by personnel. And the defensive end cut right across Pimpton's face and knocked John Emery for a loss. That's not on your offensive line. That's on your sophomore tight end who's not a great blocker yet. I'm not blaming the loss on Pimpton, but sometimes context matters when you look at plays. So I don't know, man. Long answer, but I'm just not as worried about the running game as a lot of people are.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I kind of knew that, like, kind of going in that maybe we'll have some issues running the ball, given how much Jane Daniels did. I think a lot of people don't realize that Jane Daniels really covered a lot of the losses that, especially in 2022, where the offensive line wasn't as great. I mean, really, it didn't really become great until mid-season 2022.
Yes.
And that, we saw that against Alabama. Will Campbell was absolutely walking the crap out of Will Anderson. So really, we don't know how good this offensive line can be yet, even though we already know who's on the offensive line. 4 of the 5 have been playing with each other since 2022. So, I want to shift gears a little bit to the defense. Jacoby Giller was a huge loss on the defensive line. We saw in fall practice. He was obviously the best defensive lineman. You saw in the game against USC. But in Nichols, he unfortunately tore his Achilles, second drive of the game. Who do you think is going to step up on the defensive line? We know about Ahmad Bro. We know about JVR Suggs. But is there somebody else that you can see stepping up and making a big impact on the interior?
Brian Kelly told us. He said Sean Washington. Or Brian Kelly keeps saying Sean Washington. I thought it was Sean Washington, but I guess we'll go with Sean if that's what Brian Kelly keeps saying. But Brian Kelly's been known to mess up a name or two here or there. But anyway, so Washington is the guy that went in on Saturday and took those reps. And Brian Kelly told us on Monday that they'll probably ramp up his opportunity. So, does Washington start next to Gio Paez? I guess that's probably what they'll roll out there, and then you'll keep the rest of their rotation with Lee and with Suggs. The freshmen, I think, are interesting with McKinley and Bro. Don McKinley's the 5-star, and that's the one everybody's super high on. But even McKinley, by his own admission, I talked to him on my radio show after he committed. And, I asked him what he felt like he needed to work on. And he said, hand placement and leverage, that he would pop up too high and he needed to work on it. Say that a lot of that's just technical stuff that you develop as you get on as a player. So I don't know that Don McKinley's ready to be an impact guy. But if you have to play him, you do. The example I've given a lot this week has been 2014, where you had Anthony Johnson and Ego Ferguson left early for the draft. And so Christian Lockacher, who was a true sophomore that year, was your most veteran defensive tackle. And then Devon Gottschall ended up playing next to him as a true freshman. And Gottschall ended up being a great player, man, with Miami, with the Patriots, was a really good interior defensive lineman. But as a true freshman who played defensive end in high school, that was a tough ask for him. But sometimes you just got to throw young guys into the deep end because you don't have another option. And that may be where LSU gets at some point this season. I think there's going to be games where they're exposed against much better physical interior offensive lines and good running games. But I think there's going to be games where they're plenty big enough, strong enough, and serviceable enough to eat up blocks and probably free up those linebackers to make plays. But sure sounds like Sean Washington is going to be the first guy to get the crack to take those reps from Guillory.
Yeah, and another great example of that was Emory Jones his freshman year, because Will Campbell was going to be the starting left tackle as soon as he stepped on campus, but Emory Jones was kind of in the mix. But after Southern, they just like, okay, this is our best chance to win games. And as soon as he got in, he made an immediate impact. As a matter of fact, against Mississippi State, I don't think you remember this, but he made a touchdown saving tackle on a punt return. He actually tackled Xavier Thomas, and if he doesn't make that tackle, Mississippi State may win that game. So you need somebody to obviously come in and make an immediate impact, especially with the guys like Jacoby and Guillory. But I actually asked Brian Kelly at the press conference about Gabe Relaford, because I actually thought they moved him to D tackle during the game, but it was actually nickel package. Is that somebody else that maybe they should think about moving on the inside just temporarily while they kind of figure it out?
No. Like you said, like Brian said, they have that package where when they go nickel and they kind of go with that NASCAR look, or I think Blake Baker calls it prowler. when they kick Savion Jones and Parashand on the inside, and then you've got Womack and Swinson on the outside. You move Harold Perkins up to the line. I mean, that's a crazy good look of a lot of edge rushers. So I don't think you're moving Gabe Relaford to a 3-technique defensive tackle, but I do like Gabe Relaford, Grant. I mean, I've talked about him plenty, him and Kalaj Cobbins. You know, we can look at LSU right now and recognize there's a lot of spots, especially like on the defensive line, where it doesn't really look like it's looked in the past. Safety's probably like that as well. You don't have a Grant Delpit or a Jamal Adams there. You don't have Michael Brockers or Benny Logan on the defensive line. But I think whenever you look at guys like Relaford and Cobbins and Deshaun Spears, like that's what it's supposed to look like. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like those guys are young, but you can tell, okay, that's what the really great defensive players at LSU in the past have looked like when they were freshmen. Now you might be asking them to do more right now, but it's really encouraging for the future because you can tell me like the cavalry's on the way. They're getting the recruiting thing figured out. I think it took BK a couple of years, obviously, to get his staff right. And I mean, bringing back Corey Raymond was massive, and bringing Bo Davis in. Kevin Peoples is a great recruiter too, but so all that to say, I'm very high on Gabe Relaford. I think he and Cobbins are going to be awesome players at LSU, but I don't think Cobbins is the guy that's going to kick inside and play defensive tackle for you. There may be packages like the Prowler look where they put edge rushers inside, but I don't think he's going to be a guy that's giving you 15 or 20 reps, a game at defensive tackle.
Exactly. I'm kind of glad you asked. You talked about a little bit about recruiting, and really it took Brian Kelly to hire every single one of his assistants. It had sides to Louisiana, whether it's they played college football in Louisiana, they coached at LSU or Tulane, somebody to that effect. How important is to have that type of coaching staff, especially given the amount of talent in Louisiana right now? I mean, you have Jakeem Stewart. I know he's reclassified to 2025, but he's the number one overall recruit in the country. Then you have right down the road at Dunham, you have Elijah Haven, who's the number one prospect in the country at quarterback. I mean, I think it's really important that you have a staff that has all these deep connections to Louisiana, not just South, but even up north.
Yeah, it's the most important thing for a head coach is to recruit the state. And Nick Saban, when he got the job back at the end of 1999, made it very clear. I mean, he made a statement then and a phrase that everyone still uses, which is we're going to put the fence around the state. And that is the benchmark for every championship team LSU has had since. I mean, you could look at the 03 team, Marcus Spears, Michael Clayton, Marquise Hill, Andrew Whitworth. All those guys were Louisiana kids who stayed home. And prior to Nick Saban, those guys left. I mean, Peyton Manning went to Tennessee. Reggie Wayne went to Miami. I mean, great players from this state. It wasn't fashionable. Warwick Dunn went to Florida State. Travis Minor went to Florida State. Like, it wasn't fashionable for those guys to stay home. Nick Saban said, we're putting a fence around the state, keeping the best players here. Look at every championship team LSU's had. The best players on those teams are kids from Louisiana. So, yeah, I think Brian Kelly, when he got the job, he had recruited Louisiana. Remember, I mean, he got Logan Diggs out of New Orleans. He got, who was the defensive lineman from Evangel that he got up there to Notre Dame that played for the Steelers? Went to the Chargers. I'm not blanking. Anyway, it'll pop into my brain. But the point is, Brian Kelly knows he recruited Louisiana, but I think when he got the job, he kind of waded waist deep into the Louisiana recruiting pool, not realizing, no, brother, you need a cannonball into the deep end. Like the example I was given, I don't mean this to be an insult to the kid. I don't mean it that way at all, but LSU got on a plane and flew to Las Vegas to recruit Jeremiah Hughes, who was a 3-star cornerback. Grant, I could throw a rock down the street in my neighborhood and hit a 3-star cornerback. Do you know what I mean? Like, there is no reason to go to Minnesota to recruit Jackson Howard, who I'm sure is going to be a good player, but like, recruit this state, man. Like, there's going to be times where you're going to go supplement and you're going to recruit East Texas and you're going to recruit the Panhandle and you're going to get a kid out of Georgia and the Atlanta area. No doubt that's going to happen. You're going to go get Arden Key out of Georgia. Like, you're going to get Caleb on Chasson out of Houston or Grant Delpit. Yeah, that's going to happen. But by and large, man, you got to recruit this state. And so when he got the job, he kind of had a blend. It was, he hired Frank Wilson and he brought Joe Sloan down from North Louisiana. But he also had, he had Brian Polian on his staff.
Yeah.
And he brought in, he brought Kerry Cooks with him. And it's like, it was a blend of what he knew and guys that knew him and of Louisiana. It was like, nah, dog. And I think it took him 2 years to realize, oh, no. We got to be all in on Louisiana. Mm-hmm. And so it's why you got Bo Davis. It's why you got Corey Raymond back. I mean, it's why you brought Blake Baker home. Yeah. I mean, he's there now and he's got the right staff to do it. And that's why, this 2025 class is number 3 overall, has a chance to finish number 1. And when you look at 26 is a bumper crop in the state, man. Even if Jakeem Stewart reclassifies, you're still looking at guys like Blaine Bradford and the offensive lineman from U-High and EA. I mean, you got like 7 guys in the top 100, something like that. It's ridiculous. I mean, yeah. You get all those kids to stay home. That's like the 2011, the FAM with Jarvis and Odell and Freak Johnson and all those, Lyle Collins. And that's the making of a championship roster. So, yeah, man, it's the most important thing for Brian Kelly or any LSU coach is make sure your staff is loaded up with dudes that know how to get players from every corner of this state.
Oh, yeah, no doubt. I mean, you went to Catholic high school. I mean, you mentioned Blaine Bradford and his older brother Jacob is getting a lot of heat from LSU in terms of, his recruitment. But then also Bernard Causey, the cornerback from JFK's freshman now on LSU's roster. Like, he went to school, like, literally 3 minutes from my house. And it took LSU forever to, like, even offer him, which is pretty surprising given, Frank Wilson's being from New Orleans. And I know they were, like, scouting for a while, but it took them a while to even offer him. So, I'm glad that LSU is taking a different approach to the recruiting. But kind of going back to LSU football as a whole, Harold Perkins, I know, he was ineffective the last game. I believe he was like the worst rated defender in LSU's defense by PFF. Is it time for a position change for him? Because I was talking to a couple of people like, I don't think he's a linebacker. I really think he's a strong safety, cosplaying as a linebacker.
Yeah, I don't know that he's a strong safety, but I think that but he's very good in coverage, I think, to your point. I mean, look, the interception he had last year against Missouri was a game-changing play. I mean, it's when LSU finally got a stop in that game. I remember, I think the first day of fall camp, we were out there watching, 11 on 11, and he had a beautiful play in coverage against Mason Taylor on the sideline and came away with an interception. So I think he's very good in coverage he's not a boundary corner, but at his cover skills as a linebacker and that nickel Sam role, yes. Look, you asked the question, is it time for a position change? Yeah, of course it is. I mean, the craziest thing about Perkins is it's not like we're waiting to see this guy who had this 5-star potential show the potential he had that made him a 5-star. Like, we saw it. You know what I mean? Like, we saw him as a freshman take over the Ole Miss game, take over the Arkansas game. Harold Perkins, as a freshman, was spying Heisman winner Bryce Young. Like, we saw it. I think the challenge, though, is Harold wants to be a 3-down linebacker because of the NFL. The feedback he's getting from the NFL is you need to show us you can play off the ball. And he's just not that, man. There's a physicality and an instinct associated with playing off the ball. And what Harold is as a linebacker is fast and agile and sudden and athletic. And that's what makes him so good in coverage and so good as a pass rusher. So I get it, man, if you want to be an off-ball linebacker in the NFL, but I want to be LeBron James. God just didn't give me that ability. Yeah. But he gave Harold Perkins a crazy athletic skill set that can make him a dominant college football player and a great NFL player. I think it's less about the coaching staff and more about Harold Perkins having the humility to say, let me do whatever's best for the team and put me in position to make plays instead of let me try to become an off-ball linebacker because I think that's what's going to help me translate to the next level. Boy, it's so disappointing for a lot of people. And I want to be clear, Grant, like I'm not knocking Harold Perkins. He's fantastic. I had a chance to visit with Harold at Media Days. He's a great young guy who's worked so hard and he's committing himself to doing this. But it's just so obvious to everyone it's a round peg square hole. And while you're trying to build the bridge as you cross it and get him to learn this position and get comfortable, you're hurting the defense because you're neutralizing the guy who at one point was the most feared player on your defense, and he's not at the position he's in.
Yeah, I mean, that's big concern to me for the start of the season. Like he was ineffective against USC, and really, and I don't think it was really also. I think he had an okay game against USC, but Nichols, he was completely ineffective.
He led
but
the
I'll
team in
say
tackles
this
against USC. He led the team in tackles against USC, but he was
it just didn't seem like it. Yeah.
I think 7 of the tackles were assisted. He made one great play, and I saw it. It was right in front of me. I was sitting at the 30-yard line. It was right in front of me, and you could see him creeping, and it was a delayed blitz, and he got a TFL. It was the one big impact play he made, and it was just you saw it coming, and you saw the explosion off the line, and it's like, do that. Please do that. Like, do that. Please. Do the thing you do great.
Yes, and that's the thing. Like I didn't know he led the team in tackles. I knew he had an okay game, but I didn't know he led the team in tackles. That's like it just seems like it's just not Harold Perkins. It seems like he's somebody else. But I'll say this though, Whit Weeks has looked awesome. Whit Weeks, that's really what a lot of people think Harold Perkins is what Weeks is, because Whit Weeks is your traditional linebacker. What do you have to say about his play so far?
He's great. He's instinctive.
Yeah.
He's powerful with his hands. Look, this isn't like a glory days thing. I'm not like I didn't play at a high level, but I was a high school lineman. And so I at least know conceptually what you're trying to do. And when an offensive lineman is getting to the second level, the best thing a linebacker can do to keep a big lineman off is be quick, active, and extend with their hands to keep a lineman off of him. Harold doesn't do that. Whit Weeks does. He's very good at it.
Yeah.
Whit Weeks is an instinctive off-ball linebacker. It's why it looks the way it does when Whit Weeks is playing there. And then there's another part of that position too it is instinctive, reading where a play is going to go instead of waiting and reacting, being instinctive of where the ball is going to be there in advance. It's like the inverse of a running back, where a running back is very instinctive but patient. A linebacker is the same on the other side of the ball, and it doesn't matter what your straight line 40 time is. It's how fast do you play on the field. I mean, if a running back is hesitant, it doesn't matter if you run 4-2 straight line. If you're hesitant, you're neutralizing your speed. Same with a linebacker. And so that's why Whit Weeks is great. I think it's why we sometimes see Harold Perkins struggle in that role.
Mm-hmm. And I got one last question before I'll let you go. I know these first 2 games have been kind of rough for LSU. What are your expectations going to this South Carolina game to kind of right the ship and get rid of all the demons that affected them the last 2 games?
Man, I guess I just look at it a little different, Grant. Like, I don't see it as getting rid of demons, man. Like, let me put it to you this way. You're in a tie ball game, and you're down 3 in the fourth quarter against SC, and you're driving. And they set up a beautiful play for Aaron Anderson in the flat. It's the play he scored on in the third quarter to give LSU the lead. And Nussmeier just misses him. If Nussmeier completes that pass and Aaron Anderson scores and LSU wins the game, is anybody talking today about demons of this team? You're talking about a 2-0 football team that's top 10 in America, that's going on its first road conference game, that already owns a ranked win over SC. And we're excusing the sleepwalk through Nichols because it's Nichols. Like, I mean, Grant, you were just as bored with that game as I was, dog. You know it. Like, nobody cared. Yeah. Neither did the players. And I guess I've just like covered this team long enough, man. Like, bro, I watched the 2011 team, which was the most dominant team LSU ever had until 2019. I watched them play Western Kentucky. A Western Kentucky team that finished 500, by the way. They were 5-5 when they came into Tiger Stadium. That team with Tyrann Mathieu and Eric Reed and Morris Claiborne and Sam Montgomery, Barkevius Mingo, Kevin Minter, Benny Logan, Michael Brockers. That team was in a 14-7 game at halftime with a 500 Western Kentucky team. You want to know why?
Mm.
Because they didn't give a flip about playing Western Kentucky. And LSU didn't give a flip about playing Nichols, just like the fans didn't give a flip about watching LSU play Nichols. You know what LSU's going to be up for? Road conference game against South Carolina in front of 80,000 people. So, I don't know, man.
College game day.
Yeah, man. I just think narratives get formed and we overreact, but it's part of being fans and it's just what we do. But I don't think LSU's got demons. Do they have flaws? Yes, they got flaws, man. I think the defensive line was their biggest question coming into this season, and you just lost your best guy. Like, that's a problem. I think at safety, you've had some real issues. I like moving Sage Ryan to safety. I love if Zy Alexander's healthy. Now you got guys in their more natural position. I think that's your best look. Do I want to see LSU run the ball more effectively? Absolutely, I do. But in the right spots. I don't want to see them go too tight in a fullback and run the ball just because. I want to see them run the ball and pick their spots and have some creative concepts. But I'll tell you what we have seen. We've seen jet sweeps. We've seen a lot of motion and creative short passes as an extension of the running game. Xavier Thomas and Aaron Anderson have been great in that role. Like, those are extensions of your running game. So, I don't know, man. Your quarterback leads the country in completion percentage and touchdown passes. I mean, you were a breath away from beating SC. You probably shot yourself in the foot a little bit in that game and should have won it, but you didn't. I don't know, man. I've watched Brian Kelly's teams the last 2 years lose their opener with some major flaws and continue to get better and be playing meaningful games at the end. I expect this team to be the same. I don't know if they're a playoff team, but they got enough talent. They're well coached. And I expect that come November, they're going to be playing in a really meaningful game in Baton Rouge against Alabama. That's probably going to have playoff implications.
Oh, yeah, no question. I mean, I actually felt a lot more confident in this LSU team compared to the last two losses against Florida State, just because I felt like USC is actually a really good team. They just needed to find their defense, right? Like, that was the biggest issue with USC, was just their defense, and they got to figure it out. And I feel like that even after that game, I know there's some issues with the offensive line, the running game, and the defensive line, but I felt really confident because it seems like we're headed in the right direction. And the thing is, I watched a Notre Dame game against Northern Illinois, and like, we could easily be Notre Dame right now. So if you're an LSU fan, I feel like you should be very fortunate that we're in this situation instead of Notre Dame situation.
Notre Dame's got a good win and a bad loss. I mean,
yeah,
LSU doesn't have a good win yet, but you go win a road conference game on Saturday, that'd be a good notch in your belt. I mean, it's just starting that process of climbing back, right? If you beat South Carolina, you come home and beat UCLA, who's not very good. You beat UCLA needed a last-second field goal to beat Hawaii, 16-13. You beat UCLA. You beat a South Alabama team that gave up 52 to North Texas. You've given yourself a month to iron out some of your kinks before you got to bring Ole Miss here. And you get an open date before that game as well. Look, win your next three, go into your open date, get healthy, and put a plan together Tiger Stadium is going to be outside of its brain when Ole Miss comes in here. If Ole Miss is undefeated like they should be, I mean, that's going to be one of those circle the calendar type games. So, man, I get it, man. Fans love to pound the table and yell and scream. I'm just not that guy. I was when I was a student. I mean, I was loud and vulgar and all that sort of stuff. But I guess as I keep getting older and balder, I guess I just get more measured in my temperament. Unless if I'm talking about Alabama burning.
Yeah, no doubt. Matt, where could the people find you?
Yeah, man. 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge, weekdays 3 to 6. We stream everywhere. Our app, YouTube, online. And really proud of LouisianaSports.net as well. So we launched 104.5 ESPN Baton Rouge about 15 years ago. About 7 years ago, we launched our video studio and our video component. Now we've moved into the written word component with LouisianaSports.net. Totally free, no paywalls, no subscriptions, no freemium, nothing like that. So it's all free. Got a great staff and really excited about it. So we hope people will check out LouisianaSports.net.
All right. Thank you, Matt, for joining me on the Access Granted podcast. I'm your host, Grant Chachere. Once again, Matt Moscona of 104.5 ESPN and LouisianaSports.net. Hope you guys have a great weekend.